What a week, what a way to end 2024, what a World Tour Finals. It was an amazing event, filled with some ridiculously good badminton, some memorable moments, and also some... Sorry, let me do that again. Some absolutely amazing badminton, some memorable moments, and some controversies. Welcome everyone to episode 7 of Beckman's Breakdowns, the show where I try to take a look at all of badminton's top events from Super 500 up to the majors like the Olympic Games. Trying to offer you my humble opinion on the big stories, the best matches, and of course giving a little rundown on how some of the players played. In this episode I've got plenty to talk about as, like I just said, so much happened at the World Tour Finals. Plus obviously being the top 8 ranked players on the World Tour means that every single match right from day one meant something and was involving players of the highest level. So I've done my best to kind of pick the top subjects that I want to talk about. Of course, there will be some that I might have missed out. Hopefully I'll catch them in the Q&A section. But if not, as always, add your comments below. Give me some things that you think that I might have missed out. Obviously offer your own opinions. Maybe argue with some of the things that I've said. There's plenty of things that are open to discussion within this episode. And also just let me know what you think. I'm hopeful there's going to be a few comments commenting on the better quality of audio and visual, because as you can see I've got a brand new microphone in front of me and I'm recording this on a brand new camera, so hopefully all the issues of past episodes with the glare on the screen, the poor audio quality, are a thing of the past. Right, anyway, that's enough of an introduction. Like I said, there's plenty to talk about, so let's get right into it, starting with one of the biggest controversies that happened at these World Tour Finals. So on day one of the competition, we had one of the biggest controversies go down, and that was in the men's singles match between Anders Antonsen and Li Shifeng. I said in the last video that I was wondering whether these two would have a little bit of a feisty match. They've had plenty of matches where there's been some rather what I call childish antics going down, and for the most part in this match that wasn't the case, and that's because Anders Antonsen was in complete control. Li Shifeng looked like a player that, maybe because he didn't know he was going to play in this event till the last minute, looked a little bit out of shape. Maybe he hadn't been training as much. But that's besides the point. The game was in Anders' control. However, towards the end of the second game, it did seem that Li Shifeng was starting to find his form and started to make the game quite tight and very entertaining. But all was still played with great spirits. There didn't seem to be any sort of kind of contentiousness on court, and the crowd were just enjoying what was a great match and a match that was heating up. But then at 18-17 to Antonsen in the second game, he pushed Li Shifeng deep into his forehand corner and Li Shifeng returned it, and then Antonsen missed it. And then when I was watching this match, and when probably all of you watching this were watching it, suddenly you could hear Antonsen kind of exclaim something like he was annoyed or upset at something that went down, and there was a lot of confusion. I was definitely confused, even Jill and Steen were confused. And what had transpired was that as Antonsen went to approach his shot, the service judge, who was just next to him, started to cough. And Antonsen claimed that that cough was what put him off and caused him to make an error, and that as a result, because of this outside influence, that the point should be replayed. Antonsen had a long conversation with the service judge, who then went over to the umpire to explain the situation away from the microphone. We couldn't hear what was being said, which is something that Jill Clark says that we should have access to, and I definitely agree. That would be really nice to kind of hear these interactions. I think there's always been these issues with umpires' calls, and I think if we could hear them talking, we could have a better understanding of their thought process, etc. But anyway, the crux of it was there was a lot of back and forth. I think Antonsen even tried to explain to Li Shifeng through some rather interesting body actions of what happened, but basically the let was given. Antonsen then won the next point, much to the displeasure of the crowd. They really didn't like that, and then he went on to win the match, which they really didn't like. So of course this caused an absolute scene, controversy. Even I picked up on it. I posted on Instagram, and there's ever since that point, Antonsen must have been getting, was getting a lot of hate online, a lot of people calling him unsportsmanlike, obviously ridiculing the decision, all these sorts of things, which I think to an extent are justified, because it was, for me, quite a ludicrous and ridiculous situation. Yeah, of course, maybe the cough put him off, but there's plenty of noises and sounds that go on all the time within badminton. The crowd are constantly jeering and shouting and trying to kind of, not necessarily put you off, but that's how it could be deemed. In an event like this, there's other courts being played, and sometimes music can just kick in the middle of a rally. You know, bangers in the crowd, you know, the things people bang with, if they burst, they make an almighty sound. That could be quite off-putting. Obviously, people with flash cameras. There's all sorts of things that can disrupt the players, and none of these are cause for a let on the point. I think the only thing that can be caused for a let is, I've seen it once before, maybe when a coach has started shouting at the back of the court, and the umpire might call the rally, but the most common one is obviously if a shuttle or something from outside the court actually lands on it and impedes, and it becomes a danger to the players, that a let is called. Other than obviously rule lets, like you know, a player not ready, etc. You know, when they're serving. But yeah, I honestly thought when this whole thing was going down that the decision would be that the umpire would basically go, no, it's point to Li Shifeng, you missed it, this isn't grounds for a let. So I was very, very surprised and shocked that this decision was given. What I will say, though, about the whole situation is that, yes, I kind of, like I've already said, I understand that some people were calling, a lot of people were calling Antonsen unsportsmanlike for complaining about this thing in the in the first place, but he is within his right to make a claim like this. You know, players always contest the umpire or the service judge's decision. You know, if there's a fault serve, 9 times out of 10 a player will look at the thing, go, what was it for, or even sometimes argue it. An umpire calls a net fault, most of the time a player will argue it. You know, line calls obviously now can be challenged. You know, these kind of things are well within the players' rights, and they're well within their rights to ask for the tournament referee if they feel there's been a rule that's been violated. And I think Antonsen had a slight point. I'm not quite sure on the rules, but there might be something about something that disturbs you that shouldn't be, especially if it comes from a one of the umpires, so the service judge in this case. So I don't think we should kind of get on his back too much for making that decision. For me, it's more kind of crazy that the umpire actually decided to give this as a let. And again, I don't think that also means that we should just then hate on the umpire. It was a bit of a unique situation. I'm not quite sure how he, you know, felt under the pressure. I made a joke about the service judge was... maybe he was trying to make up for the All England one, because the service judge was the same umpire as in the All England quarterfinal where Zheng applauded for a let because of a flash camera at a very crucial stage against Yamaguchi, and it wasn't given, you know, because play had started or whatever. I don't quite know. That one actually, if I'm honest, more of a case that it should be replayed, because the rally literally was off the serve. This one was in the middle of the point. Another reason why I don't think it should have been given, and maybe this might kind of bolster people's thoughts that maybe it's quite unsportsmanlike of Antonsen, and that was that earlier, a few points before, in the highlight video, you can clearly see Antonsen plays a lift from the middle of the court, so he's a little bit more to the centre rather than right out to the side, so he's a bit further from the service judge, but you can see the service judge coughing then, and Antonsen obviously he didn't make a mistake. I can't remember if he won that rally or not. The rally might have gone on, but he didn't call for that one. But when it was at a much more crucial stage, because Li Shifeng was really getting back into the match, and obviously Antonsen lost the point, suddenly he was disturbed by it. So I can kind of see both sides. I think it's well within Antonsen was well within his rights to complain and to ask for the let. I don't think it should have been given, because, you know, in a crowd that's that loud, I don't know how much the players can actually hear, but I don't think it's that much of a disturbing factor. And also, it had happened earlier in the match, yet he didn't say anything. But yeah, it was a massive controversy, and obviously the Chinese crowd from then on really didn't take to Antonsen. In every single match he was booed. I mean, the next day against LZJ, when his name was called, the boos were absolutely insane. And then from the later on in the knockout matches, every time that he went to serve, the crowd were like making coughing sounds and doing all this kind of thing, kind of mocking him and stuff. And that was quite hard to see. I mean, I kind of get it. I mean, this happened against one of their players. I think if it had happened against someone else, maybe it would have been forgiven. But the fact it happened to them, one of their players, at such a crucial stage when Li Shifeng was coming to the game. It just was like this melting pot of things that came to. One thing I will say about this whole thing is that I think it really did affect Antonsen. He was playing very confidently against Li Shifeng in the first game. He looked supremely good. And then for the rest of the matches, he still made the final. But he lost both his next 2 matches in the group stages, but qualified only really because Li Zijia unfortunately got injured. More on that later. And then he played a good match against Christie. But then in the final, he was completely outclassed. But what I will say is that he looked very subdued. Antonsen is someone that, usually kind of exudes confidence and does all these things. And I just got this sense that he was playing, he still wanted to win. He was still giving it all he could. But this whole situation that had played out throughout the week was definitely on his mind. He was doing all sorts of weird things to me. Like, he was being overly elaborate when he dived, almost like trying to get the crowd to laugh and maybe come back on his side. Whenever, in the final at 11 or a game, he would, do this weird jog off the court rather than just walking off. I don't know, it just felt like someone who was still trying to win, but almost trying to hide on court. And he definitely knocked his confidence. He was still playing well, but he looked like someone that just wanted to get the week over with, yet still wanted to win, and he still managed to get to the final. I mean, one big thing was that he clearly wasn't trying to do anything to kind of upset the crowd, because in the final against Shi Yuqi, there was a point where Shi Yuqi killed it, and Antonsen, it went off his racket and came back, and it was called a fault for Antonsen. And usually, if that was the case, he'd be on it. He'd be exclaiming to the crowd. He'd be looking at the jumbotron, trying to go, look, doing all what he can to get the kind of decision overruled. Yet he didn't do anything. He literally just accepted it very easily, just kind of moved on. And to me, that kind of summed it up, really. He just was doing all sorts of things, in my eyes, to try to get the crowd maybe back on his side. When he walked out in the final, he's waving to the crowd, but it's almost like this, rather than kind of what you would expect from him. He loves coming out with a little bit of showmanship. We all remember how he came out at his world final with Switzerland, when he came up with the flag on his back, and it's like a boxer entering the ring. So he just looked like a much more subdued player, which was quite sad to see. And I hope this doesn't kind of continue on into the future. Yeah, it was a sour moment. Maybe we don't know how he's going to reflect on it. I know in the post-match interview after this whole situation, he did kind of double down a little bit and said that he felt that it was the right decision and that he was right to kind of question it. And maybe he was, but yeah, no, it was. I personally think it was a bad decision, but I don't think we should hold it too much over Antonsen's head. And I think it definitely affected him for the rest of the tournament. Okay, continuing on with Anders Antonsen, there's actually another controversy, I guess you could call it, next to his name throughout this week. A slightly smaller one, it's gone a little bit more unnoticed, but I was surprised it didn't make more hoo-ha. And that was in his final match, his final group match against Chen. Antonsen lost that match in 3 games, and what that meant was that him and Chen went through. This was because Li Zijia, who was controlling the group and was literally a few points from going through, unfortunately rolled his ankle and had to withdraw. So it became it was a 3-way tie between Li Shifeng, Chen, and Anders. They were all, when they finished the group stages, they were all on 1 win each. But because Anders had won his one match in 2 games, and Li Shifeng had lost his match in 2 straight games, whereas Cho had won and lost in 3, it meant that I think because he won an extra game, as opposed to Li Shifeng, Chen went through. But that really wasn't the controversy. It was more the fact that Antonsen didn't play to his absolute maximum ability against Chen. And so there was this kind of theory that Anders had purposely done that so that Chen and himself will go through and Li Shifeng would be out. I don't think this holds any weight at all. I don't think Anders did that. I think it was simply because Anders, once he won the first game and had known that he'd done enough to qualify, he then just played the rest of the match like a practice game. He didn't want to waste any more energy because he obviously knew that he was keeping one eye on the knockout stages where, any player he was going to face was going to take a lot out of him. And obviously he knew that if to win, he'd have to win 2 more games. So there made no sense for him once he'd guaranteed his qualification, and whether coming top or second meant no difference really in where he was going to be positioned or It wasn't going to give him any sort of favourable draw. He just was like, okay, I'll keep my eye in. I'm not going to I'm not just going to completely roll over. It's still good practice for me today, but I don't need to go at 100%. And so obviously that favoured Chen and obviously put a disadvantage Li Shifeng. The reason I say this is because other players did the same. Maybe it wasn't quite in the same situation that them losing put someone else out, but Shi Yuqi, once he'd guaranteed his qualification, in his final match against Kodo Naraoka, who was bottom of the group, he lost very comfortably. And the fact that Shi Yuqi won the tournament, was playing really, really well, it was an obvious performance of just someone went out there to kind of just basically play. He wasn't trying to win at all. But no one really called up on that, and Shi Yuqi did that because his match the day before against Kunlevut was an absolute slogfest, absolutely brutal match, really good match, but obviously he knew he'd qualified, so he didn't want to then go waste more energy. Playing someone like Kodai to win takes a lot of effort, it would take a lot out of him, and he'd have not as much left in the knockout stages where it really matters. So he did that, yet that wasn't called on, but there were a few people saying that Antonsen purposely didn't play as hard as against Chen because he wanted to put Li Shifeng out, and I 100% know that isn't the case. Well, I don't 100% know, but I'm pretty damn sure that he wouldn't have done that, that wasn't the case. I think it was purely a tactical thing for his own physical well-being and trying to maintain as much energy as he could. Funny thing before I end this is that the crowd were still booing Antonsen, whereas actually if they wanted to have their player go through, they should have actually been supporting him. So funnily enough, that kind of booing of Antonsen all the way through didn't actually help their player in that last match. But not that that would have made any difference, because I still think Antonsen would have done the same thing. I still think Cho would have won that, Antonsen would have, and they would have gone through. So yeah, I don't think that Antonsen lost purposely against Chen with the reason of to put Li Shifeng out. I think it was just a tactical decision. You've seen me as I've been on the topic of men's singles, more specifically Antonsen and his group matches. I think it makes sense to next look at another player that was in that group, a player that should have qualified and possibly had a very good chance of winning the whole thing, and that is Malaysia's Li Zijia. What happened to Li Zijia was that he'd won his opening two matches. He'd beaten Li Shifeng and Anders Antonsen. Not Li Shifeng. He'd beaten Chen. He'd beaten Anders Antonsen. He was in the driving seat, basically. He was a few minutes away from qualifying for the knockout stages. Yet, unfortunately, he jumped back towards his forehand corner and rolled his ankle, landing quite awkwardly, and as a result had to be stretchered off. Well, given a wheelchair off the court and had to withdraw from the tournament. Obviously, that meant that he was out. Sadly, it also meant that he lost all ranking points and prize money, possibly. I don't actually 100% know if that's the case. It's not really the point of this section, but I hope it isn't. And if it is, then I think that rule does need to be looked at. But that's for another time. What I want to talk about here is that obviously a lot of people were asking me after this was, could Li Zijia have won the whole thing, and what was it about him that made him so good in this tournament? And for me, for that second question, I think there's a couple of things. One is you have to understand what made him play so well. You kind of have to understand what some of Li Zijia's weaknesses are. And for me, the main ones are his agility and his consistency and his accuracy of his attacking shots. It's not to say any of those are really bad, but they are definitely weaknesses. He's not the most agile. He's obviously a phenomenal athlete, and I think when he's going in straight lines, he can cover the court in like one or two steps. Very powerful. But if he's forced to twist and turn or move an extra step, then he can sometimes come unstuck. He likes to take big, long lunges, and that can mean a slight lack in speed or recovery speed, and as a result, he can get sometimes twisted and turned out of position against certain players. I think it's why, say, someone like Koki Watanabe, who's very quick and nimble, can play the big court very sharp, those stop drops, nice sharp cross-court defences, was always a player that's quite difficult for Li Zijia to play. When I say consistency, I don't just mean his tournament to tournament. His level can be up and down, but it's more like he can just make a lot of uncharacteristic errors, a lot of unforced errors. And then on his attack, we all know he can smash it incredibly hard, both from his forehand and his backhand. but sometimes it lacks that little bit of accuracy. It goes a little bit towards the player, towards his opponent, which then allows them to defend that a little bit easier, and also then, as a result, expose the other weakness, the agility and the kind of movement speed. So at the World Tour Finals, he was still making a few unforced errors, but he was definitely reduced that. Big thing was he did look a little bit faster. He did look a little bit quicker on his feet, moving away from wherever he was on the court. Rather than just like lurching and lunging, he was kind of like moving with slightly faster feet, which was really good to see. But the big thing was that his attack was so much more accurate. I saw so many times from his forehand, him just putting down like a stick smash, and it would just go down the line. And so obviously that made it much more difficult for his opponents to defend. It also meant that LZJ could be a little bit more confident on what shot he was going to get next. And it also limited the times where he was then made to kind of twist and turn. And so I think all those factors combined just led to the LZJ that we were seeing. And obviously with each match that he was playing better and better, he gains more confidence and makes everything better and better. And he starts to have this belief that this was my tournament. So yeah, with all those, it was a real shame that we didn't get that his tournament had to end in the way it did. I mean, I can't obviously guarantee for 100% that he would have won. He definitely could have. I think someone like a Siwei might have actually really troubled him, because Siwei was also playing really well this week. But it would have been a really good final to see, because both those players were playing with great accuracy on their attacks. So it's just a shame that it had to end this way, and that we didn't get to see him deliver more of those performances in the knockout stages, because he did seem as well. Not only did he play well from his first match, but as the group stages went on, he was getting better and better. So yeah, no, it's a real shame. The injury itself has turned out to be ligament damage, so it was quite serious. Obviously, the wheelchair wasn't just for show. He generally was in a lot of discomfort, and unfortunately, this injury, leads on to the next section that I do have to talk about. Quite a contentious one, I believe, and that's the new BWF rule around the cold spray. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so the injury to LZJ, there were a lot of people kind of talking about it, because there was a lot of other injuries that went on throughout the week as well. We had on day one, we had Go Sifei in the men's doubles suffering cramp. We had Fajr Alfian also roll his ankle, obviously not quite as severely as LZJ did. We had Reng Shangyu with his back that actually had to have him withdraw from the tournament. I believe Ohori had an injury as well. And I might be missing out one or two here. There was quite a few occasions of genuine issues and injuries that occurred, that are obviously always really sad to see. And so what this brought about, obviously brought front and centre, was the new ruling that BWF brought in only a couple of tournaments ago, which was that the doctor can be called onto court, but the doctor cannot administer cold spray. They can obviously, the only injury they can treat is a blood injury. They can obviously do the plaster and cover it, but they can't do anything else. They can only assess the injury and obviously kind of give their thoughts on whether a player is fit to continue or not. And obviously with these kind of situations, there was quite a lot of moments where a player was in clearly agony, but the umpire was either not allowing the doctor on court, which I don't think was true, but obviously was saying they were calling, can I do the cold spray? And the umpires, obviously with the new ruling, weren't allowing them to, because it's not within the rules anymore. Players can use cold spray, but only in mid-game intervals, and obviously a lot of these injuries happened either too many points away, or it's not really fair if you could easily say, well, why don't you just kind of play on and a little bit until mid-game interval, but then you're throwing away points. You pretty much are losing a game if that's the case, especially if it happens quite early in one half of a game. And so a lot of people have kind of been asking me, and obviously there's been a lot of BWF hatred. That's quite a common thing in the badminton world. If you're new to badminton, this happens all the time, as I'm sure it is the case with a lot of other sports in their sporting federations. Basically saying, can't you bring back the cold spray rule? For me, I'm not actually too much against this rule, because remember, when this happened, I talked about this in one of my earlier Beckman breakdown, and I said that I think it was a good thing because there were too many players abusing the rule. And I also said that obviously it's going to then affect players that are genuine. And obviously that did happen a lot here. However, when I did say that, when I talked about it in the last video, there was no one in the comments, and I don't remember anyone talking about this until this tournament, about this rule, saying that this was unfair or something. It's only because now some genuine cases have happened that suddenly it's become an issue. For me, I do think there could be some concessions to this rule. I think maybe it's gone a little bit too harsh one way. I think what could be a solution would be, obviously you adopt, this might work better in doubles events because you've got a partner, but why can't you allow, just like you can ask the umpire to towel down or to apply some grip powder because, you know, you've got sweat in your eyes or it's running onto the court or you just need to re-grip your racket. Can't you do the same for a cold spray? Especially if it's in the bag, it will take 2 seconds. Obviously a player can't take their shoes off and all stuff. That's up to the discretion of the umpire how much they allow. But just allows a player, saying goes to face case, it was on his calf, he could literally go into his bag, spray his calf for 5 seconds, and it would have alleviated a lot of pain, and kind of helped him, and it would have made literally zero disruption, no more than asking for a toweling break. So I think there are some concessions to be made. I don't think we need to vilify this new rule 100%. We also have to bear in mind that a lot of the injuries that happen to the players, cold spray wouldn't have really done anything. If I just talk about LZJ, what turned out was ligament damage. Cold spray might have allowed to alleviate a little bit of pain then. He still wouldn't have been able to play on in the match. He would have obviously still qualified for the next day and he just stood on court and played it. But there's no way he would have been able to play the next day. He still would have had to withdraw, and actually that would have then taken a spot away from someone else, which maybe LZJ was actually thinking about. So we have to realise that cold spray isn't magic spray. Even in Goes to Phase case where it was cramp, it wasn't like an actual, what you quote-unquote injury. I don't know how you would classify cramp, but cold spray might have alleviated a little bit of pain for him, but it wouldn't have made a massive amount of difference. So yes, I'm still in agreement with this rule. I'm happy to talk about it with people in the comments, but I do think there could be some concessions made. Like I said, a player can ask, can I, rather than toweling down, can I just quickly administer some cold spray onto my shoulder? It would literally take, it's in their bag. The players are allowed to bring it onto court now because they administered themselves in the mid-game intervals, so why not allow them to use it outside of the mid-game intervals? It would be no disruption more than a toweling down or taking a drink of water or re-gripping their powder. I don't quite see why that can't be allowed, and it could just be under the purview of the umpire's discretion. Of course, if we do that, there will be players that might try and do it a lot. Whatever rule that's put in, there's always going to be players trying to use it to their maximum amount of their advantage, and I think that's why this rule was put in, because players were taking the mick a little bit. There was definitely a lot of cases of trying to kill momentum by going and get the dots wrong because it takes so long. The dots got to come on, they've got to have this talk, then they do the spray, then they get on court. Whereas now the players have it in their bag, why not allow them just to do it whenever, as long as the umpire allows it and it's quick. Like I said, it would work easier for doubles for your partner, especially if you're on your back. A singles player couldn't do that, but again, still, I think it's a better solution than what we've got now. But in summary, I don't think it's a bad rule, but I think there could be some tweaking. And I'm hopeful that BWF are looking at this tournament, because we don't want to see players in complete distress. We know cold spray isn't magic spray, but it could have alleviated a little bit of discomfort for the players. We do need to kind of bear that in mind. So this is probably, outside of Antonsen in the coughing situation, this is probably the most contentious thing that's going to be talked about on this video. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Are you for the rule? Are you against it? Do you think that it needs to be tweaked? For me, I think there could be a little bit of middle ground in what we've got. I think I didn't quite agree with the rule before. I think we've kind of gone too far. It's been switched too far, and I think there could be somewhere in the middle. But yeah, love to hear your thoughts on this. Going to move on with the video now. I want to talk now about Zhi Yi, and that's not just because he won the men's singles event, proving why he was the men's singles player of the year and proving why he is the world #1. No, it's because of the way that he did it that I was particularly impressed with. Especially, I think what really, for me, he was showing, like we saw this in his last tournament where he was showing some of this level that we saw before the Olympics, some of the level that made us believe that he was, well, made us think he is, not made us think, sorry, had him as our favourite for the Olympic Games. Obviously, that didn't come about, and since then, obviously since the Olympics, he's had his issues. He wasn't quite sure whether he wanted to continue. He was having some injury issues, and then at his last tournament, it was really good to see him playing pretty good badminton and fighting for it. And obviously at these World Tour finals, that was everything ramped up, and I did kind of think that might be the case. I thought that the confidence from his run at the China Masters would feed into these World Tour finals, and that was definitely it. But more than that, for me, Zhi Yi not just showed the level that he showed before the Olympics, but also what made him so good before the Olympics, which was that no matter what was happening what was going on in the game, the situation he found himself in, he seemed to find a way to win. And that was no better summed up than in his group game against Kunluit Vitetsan. He lost the opening game quite comfortably. Kunluit was playing really good badminton. I thought that maybe he would come in not that great a shape, but actually he kind of proved me wrong there. He was not in Olympic game shape, but he was in very good condition. And then also, so Zhi Yi lost the opening game, managed to level it up, but in the third game he was 13-6 or 14-6 down. And the way the match was going, it seemed that Kunluit was going to run away with it. But Zhi Yi hung in there, managed to find a way to get back into the game, and then the final, from 14 all, 15 all, some of the rallies, well, not some of them, pretty much all of them were absolutely brutal. Yet Zhi Yi hung in there, and managed to find a way to win 25-23 in the third. It was a fantastic game, really good, really entertaining to watch. Both players are playing really good badminton, but for me, what really stood out, I was like, that's the Zhi Yi that we saw before the Olympics. That's the Zhi Yi that was making some miraculous comebacks or playing some really good badminton, and so that was really fantastic to see. And then in the knockout stages, especially in the final, we saw a different Zhi Yi that was also the kind of Zhi Yi we saw for the Olympics, and that was the guy that was hitting lines on all his attacks, super sharp, moving really well, playing super confidently. In that final against Antonsen, he never really looked in trouble. He looked so comfortable on court, and was hitting some absolutely ludicrous winners, some of them from absolutely nowhere. So yeah, fantastic to see Zhi Yi back on top. It'll be interesting to see how he pushes into next year. Can he kind of win some more major competitions? Can he maintain this consistency throughout the year? And can he kind of keep his world #1 spot, basically? Playing like that, he's going to be difficult to knock off that spot. And yeah, so it was really good to see that. I definitely remember thinking, this is the Zhi Yi that we saw before the Olympics. Pre-Olympic Zhi. That's kind of how I saw it. And it was really good to see, and I can't wait to watch more of him in 2025. The next section I want to talk about is the Chinese women's events. And I think everyone was a little bit surprised when finals day hit that we had no Chinese women in the women's doubles, and that it was an all Chinese women's singles final. I think a lot of people thought that it'd kind of be the other way around, or at least we should have had one Chinese women's doubles pair in the final. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's first focus on the women's singles. I said in my last video that this tournament I felt was going to be a big test for the women's singles players, Wang Zhi Yi and Han Yue. They went in as #1 and #2 seed. And I felt this was the first real big competition where they're going to be leading the Chinese. They are seen as the next two players to kind of carry Chinese women's singles throughout the next Olympic period, because I'm not quite sure how much longer Chen Yufei is going to continue playing for. Obviously, He Bingjiao has retired. So there's been a lot of tournaments since, because He Bingjiao retired after the Olympic Games, and Chen Yufei's been having a sabbatical from badminton. So there's been plenty of tournaments where it has been Wang Zhi and Han Yue and a couple of others trying to lead Chinese women's singles. But this was the first, for me, massive tournament. There was the China Open 1000, but for me this was the first big major one. And so for me there was a big question as to whether they could handle that pressure. And they did, because it was a all Chinese women's singles final. They were by no means flawless. Wang Zhi Yi lost in the group stages in a close match to Oh Hori, and Han Yue lost to Yaqiong, which is not a bad result, but she did defeat Yamaguchi and Katat Thong. For me, what was really good, especially about Wang Zhi Yi, was that after she lost to Oh Hori, she came back even stronger the next day and beat Tung Jung incredibly easily. She kind of took that result on the chin, and then just came back the next day, absolutely determined. It's a little bit like what we saw in the other group with Antonsen. She lost to Yamaguchi. Again, not a bad result for her, I guess. Yamaguchi is a former 2-time world champion. But Antonsen the next day against Han Yue came out absolutely firing all cylinders. You know, that's the kind of what I expect from a champion. And Wang Zhi Yi showed that in her groups. So yeah, no, it was an all-Chinese women's singles final. The match itself as well, their women's singles final was really good. It was an absolute slogfest in the end. I did think it became... Han Yue just didn't quite have the physicality to defeat Wang Zhi Yi. But she showed, I thought it would actually be, having watched them play the semi-finals, I did think that Wang Zhi Yi was the favourite and that she might run over Han Yue a little bit if she played the way she did. I thought that playing at such a fast pace with the punch clears and the fast slices that I wasn't sure Han Yue would be able to handle it, because that's what Antonsen did to her in the group stages, and that proved so effective. But Wang Zhi Yi did play a little bit slower, but it was also, I got to credit to Han Yue, who played with fantastic defense and was also hitting some really good, fast, sharp attacks. For me, both these players not only stepped up and showed some really kind of strong mental strength, but they've also developed as players over the course of this year. I think Wang Zhi has filled out, got a lot stronger. She is so solid in her footwork. If you want to learn how to do almost perfect footwork, I would recommend watching her play. Her patterns and movements are really good. Her technique is very clinical, and you know, she's just got a lot more solid, a lot more stronger. She's kind of filled out. And for Han Yue, for me, I think she's got a lot faster in her footwork. She's slightly taller, she's got a longer swing, and I always felt that she lacked that little bit of strength on court, a little bit of speed, a little bit of agility. If players could play a little bit faster than her, she'd really struggle, but she's definitely stepped that up. Both players just seem much stronger. They've definitely come into their own, and I think by the way they played, and they show that they can handle pressured situations with the continued physical and technical developments. They're going to be two players that are going to be pushing for the big titles, and could definitely be a contender for Antonsen to try and disrupt her and in her quest to dominate women's singles badminton. So yeah, women's singles is definitely in a bit of a transition phase. That's something Steen Pedersen said, and I think coming out the top of this end is going to be Wang Zhi Yi and Han Yue. They were absolutely fantastic. And what I'll finish on talking about this, I want to focus a little bit on the winner, which was Wang Zhi Yi. And that was that, and also it kind of relates to the final, is that we all remember the Uber Cup when China lost, and it was Wang Zhi Yi that lost to Sim Yu-jin. It was a massively highly pressured situation, probably more so than these World Tour finals, but she really struggled to handle that. She was by far that favourite in that match, and she couldn't handle it. What she showed here when she was a game, and then she threw away her lead in the second against Han Yue, and was 19-16 down, and Steen Pedersen, I remember saying something like, she's going to have to pull something out special here. She's going to have to show truly what she's got upstairs, what she's got mentally, and she absolutely delivered. I think there was a rally at like 18-19 that was just decisive. So that, for me, shows that Wang Zhi is not only developed physically, but she's getting a lot stronger mentally, which is definitely something that she'll need if she needs to lead. She's going to try to lead the Chinese women's singles. And Han Yue kind of showed it herself as well. She was absolutely exhausted for a large part of that final, yet she just kept going. She did run out of steam eventually in the third, but I loved her fight and her grit and determination, and she's got some absolutely fantastic attacking shots. So they're definitely two players to look ahead to in 2025, and I think China's women's singles is in a healthy spot. For their women's doubles, I said it was a bit of a surprise. I think the big surprise was more Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning, the Olympic silver medalists and world number ones, losing to Baek Ha-na and Lee So-hee in the semi-finals. I say surprising, but maybe it wasn't so much, because I think the conditions being a bit slower definitely helped the Korean style. Lee So-hee and Baek Ha-na have had a bit of a rough time since the Olympics, but they showed at this tournament some of the kind of level that got them so high in the rankings and earned them a lot of titles. They did win the overall thing, and I think the conditions definitely played into their hands. And also Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning did look a little bit susceptible in the group stages. I think the pressured situation, the expectations got to them a little bit. I also think against the Koreans, whose defences are so strong and so solid, that Liu Xingxu and Tan Ning for the last few tournaments have managed to win by literally blitzing and blasting their opponents off the court. And when they suddenly came up against a pair that wasn't working against, they kind of almost looked a little bit shocked by it. They didn't play with enough variety in their attacks. It was a little bit one speed, one pace. Everything from the flat game to the overhead shots were all kind of played at one ferocious pace. So I think they needed to play it with a little bit more variety. But I believe that was more a combination of them feeling the pressure of the situation, you know, expectations that they were there to deliver nothing but a title. And that they just, over the last few tournaments, they haven't been used to having a pair that can defend that well against them. So I think they became a little bit unstuck. For Chen Qingchen and Jai Fan, they lost to Matsuyama Shida, and they hadn't lost to them in like 9 matches. So that, on paper, looks like a bit of a surprise. But I think what we need to consider is that Chen Qingchen was nowhere near match fit. She looked, after that opening game in the semis, which went on for like 45 minutes, she was a spent force. Obviously, they also have been lacking some match practice together, some match play. Chen Qingchen hasn't played since the Olympics. So that was definitely a factor. So I don't think the result, it was a shock, it was a bit of a surprise, but not as much of a surprise. So I think if you look at the women's doubles, I was certainly surprised there was no Chinese players in the final. I think had Chen Qingchen Jai Fan been playing consistently, it would have been even more of a surprise. But if you consider all those factors, it maybe wasn't so. But yeah, no, really good for the Chinese women's singles players. And yeah, a bit of a letdown for the Chinese women's doubles, and a bit of a surprise, but maybe not as much of a surprise as you might first think. Okay, so Kim Astrup and Anders Skarrett Rasmussen won the men's doubles at these World Tour finals, and they also now become the world number ones. A fantastic achievement for a pair that, if you look at their ages, you'd think they're in the twilight of their career, but they're actually just getting stronger and stronger. They've also become just the second pair in World Tour history to win all tournaments at 300, 500, 750, 1000, and also now World Tour finals. The other pair being Li Yang and Wang Zhi Yi Rivalry. This pair are just getting better and better. I think I did do a video on them actually earlier this year, and I think basically the kind of points I made in that video have just continued in this as this year has gone on. They've obviously continued to develop their strength, their quality in their reverse rolls. Obviously, they're much more known for Astrup at the net and Rasmussen at the back, but Rasmussen has really improved his front court play. Not just when he's there, but actually moving forward into the front court as well. And Astrup's overhead has definitely got a bit more bite, but he was also using some really good angles. And I think everything, all of that, their wins, everything, they're just building much more confidence in themselves. And I think they're really also getting a lot of confidence from having Thomas Staungard behind the court. That partnership between those three has got so strong, you can just sense it, and I think that leads to a lot of internal confidence. They definitely have a lot more belief in their ability. Even when they kind of go to a tournament, don't do so well, they're able to kind of not let it dwell. It doesn't bleed into a number of tournaments. They're able to kind of come back, reset, and go again, and they're always going to be a threat. So in this tournament, I think they were helped a little bit by the conditions. I did say that in my last video, that I felt the men's doubles event could be decided on the conditions, and they turned out to be slightly slower, which I felt would favour the Malaysians and the Danish pairs. Obviously, it was Denmark versus Malaysia in the final, so that kind of proved to be true. In the final itself, I think they were just that little bit in the third game, they were just able to stick to their tactics a little bit. They were able to kind of expose Nur Zudin, who wasn't playing his best badminton in the final. They were able to get Nur towards the front and Go Zhifei at the back. And they were just a little bit more organised, and they were just a little bit more consistent. Just everything was just that little bit better. Their defence was rock solid throughout the week. And yeah, throughout the whole week, they actually played really, really well. They had a number of good wins in the group stages, and then they had some fantastic wins, obviously, in the knockout stages. So thoroughly deserved. They are getting better and better. I can't quite believe that Anders Rasmussen will be turning 36 in January. I know that we all know that players, and especially in the men's doubles, can get these kind of results in the later years. We all know about the daddies, Asan and Setiawan, winning tournaments into their late 30s. But yeah, no, it's, and also proving into the fact that obviously Danish pairs tend to, European pairs more so than Danish pairs, I guess, but tend to get their better results later in life. So they're kind of proving that true. How much longer they can keep going? They look really good. Like Anders Rasmussen doesn't rarely suffer injuries. Astrup has definitely been minimizing. He was always a bit injury prone. He's been minimizing that with, I think they've got much more better training structure. They know what works for them. They know just the right amount to do. And I think we could see plenty more of them for another couple of years. Whether they can go to the next Olympics, we'll have to wait and see. That's, Rasmussen will be pushing 40 at that point. And so would Astrup, actually. So that maybe might be a little bit out of their reach, but who knows? They are doing very well, and let's not look too far ahead. Let's focus on now, and I just wanted to kind of congratulate them. I thought they played a fantastic tournament. The conditions helped them, but they also were able to, within the slow conditions, still find attacking opportunities. They were very efficient. And I think just the fact that they've improved so much in their reversed favoured formation has been an absolute key to their success. And I just want to finish this section just to talk a little bit about the Malaysian pair, and that is that I was very impressed. They've had a very good year. They were also going, if they'd won, they would have been the second pair to do all the tournaments. But the reason I want to quickly mention them is that after Go Sufei's cramp in day one, they were still able to come back and still play as well as they did. That just shows a really good fighting spirit, and I think shows just how much they've come on. And I'm also excited to see them into 2025. Oh, and sorry, another pair that I have to mention is I have to talk about Gautama in Isfahani. The conditions, like I said, was slow, and I felt that wouldn't favour the Indonesian pair. Yet Gautama and Isfahani had some great wins. This was their first World Tour Finals. They've had a fantastic year, and it shows that even within conditions that maybe not quite as favourable for them, they're still able to deliver some great wins. So they're going to be another pair that would be interesting to see how they do in 2025. They're going to obviously go into this 2025 with maybe a little bit more expectations on the shoulders and from themselves, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle that and their progression moving in. So men's doubles, exciting and very open discipline, and yeah, that's how I want to end that section. Okay, so the last section I want to talk about before I get onto the Q&A, all the fantastic questions you guys sent in, is obviously I have to talk about Zheng Siwei and Wang Yaqiong. It was going to be their final tournament, their swan song, and they were obviously looking to try to go out on top, try to go out the way they spent so much of their career, and they were able to do so. It was by no means an easy road to the title, and there's plenty to talk about. I could do my own video on this thing. I think a lot of people said that you could do your whole own video on Zheng Siwei and Wang Yaqiong, and maybe I will. I do definitely want to do a video on Zheng Siwei's career. I've got a few ideas on how I could do that. But obviously, a lot of eyes were on them. People were a little bit unsure, as they were about a couple other pairs within this tournament, as to what would the level be, because they hadn't played since the Olympics. They definitely looked like a pair that had been training hard. They looked physically strong. They just lacked that little bit of match play. They looked a little bit off, which was exposed in their opening game against their compatriots. They were also a bit of a bogey pair for them. But for me, what really stood out was just, I felt that Zheng Siwei was his usual self. He's all over the court. He's one of the most relentless attackers, but his quality of shot was definitely a little bit down, and as a result, they were being countered a little bit easier than we're used to seeing. He was going a little bit wild and gun-ho at times, and that was being exposed. But what they did really well is what they've always done really well. They've always found ways to win matches. They showed that in their second group match against the very awkward and difficult pair of Tang and Siwei. They almost lost that one, but they managed to find a way to win. And then they managed, from there, they kind of were playing themselves. With each match, they were definitely playing themselves into some form. They never quite hit, obviously, and we shouldn't have expected them to, their best form. They weren't going to hit the sort of level that we've seen at the Olympics or at the other big events, but they were definitely getting better and better. I think Zheng Siwei admitted that he was feeling very tired after every match, but as the tournament progressed and he got into it, that started to get less. I think you do play yourself in. And obviously I can't talk about Zheng Siwei and Wang Yaqiong without talking about the final, where they played Chen, Tang, and To Wei in what was I thought, and a lot of people thought, Jill and Steen thought, it was the best mixed match of 2024. It might be one of the best mixed matches I've seen in a long time, probably further back than just that. It reminded me when I was watching, it was played at such a ferocious pace. Both pairs were giving it absolutely everything. Both pairs were defending well, attacking well. Yeah, it was really, really good and interesting to watch. And I hadn't quite seen that level of mixed doubles at that pace. We've seen different kinds of mixed matches, but I haven't seen that kind of intensity since matches between Zheng and Wang Yi Lu and Wang Dongping. You know, where I remember seeing their match not just at the Olympics in Tokyo, but the Chinese National Games afterwards, and that's probably one of the best mixed matches I've ever seen. And this final at the World Tour Finals was almost played in a similar way. It was played at such an intensity. I felt in the first game the Malaysians were just that little bit too defensive. Their defense was really strong, and it held up throughout the whole match, but they were playing a little bit too defensively. Maybe it was a bit of a kind of thing they weren't quite sure if they could win or not. But from the second and third on, they were defending really well, but then they're also trying to take on the attack, and they were doing so absolutely brilliantly. I did think that there were times where Zheng Siwei was going a little bit too gun-ho. I mentioned that earlier. His attack was a little bit wild, and they were getting countered at times. There were times where he was trying to still hit smashes from miles behind him, and it just wasn't working. I thought his shot quality and shot choice at times was a bit dubious, and I think as a result, Wang Yaqiong didn't get involved in the game as much as she probably should have been. But yeah, but you have to also give credit to the Malaysians. Siwei was absolutely sublime in defence and playing the front court absolutely brilliantly, and Chen Tangji, his attack, super sharp and super good. It was just a fantastic game. I actually felt for Zheng Siwei and Wang Yaqiong, they got better when Zheng Siwei got a little bit tired. You could see in the third he was breathing heavily, but still doing what he does best, which was just absolutely busting his balls. But I think when he got a little bit tired, he actually had to play a little bit smarter, and then that was actually the game in the third game. I think the shot quality and the tactical side was that little bit better, and then I think what ultimately decided it was the Chinese had just been in those positions so much more. Chen and To, this was their biggest final by far. They'd never beaten Zheng and Wang, and I think that showed. They just made a few errors at the end, which proved decisive. But it was a fantastic match, by far the best match of finals day. Arguably the best game of the whole World Tour Finals. There was plenty of other matches that could lay claim to that, but it was because it was a final, because Zheng and Wang were looking to go out on top, and because the Malaysians were playing so well, and they were also had plenty riding on it, that it just added to it, and it gave this game so much more. And yeah, no, credit to all four players. They played a fantastic match, and there's not really much else to say. I keep repeating myself here, but that's just, you have to go and watch it. I'll probably put the link in the description below. I don't think what I could say could do it justice. You just got to go and watch it. And I did a little video on it for the BWF, and so many people were commenting on it saying, you know, I sat down to have a snack and then I ended up raiding the entire fridge, or I saw it come on in a bar and I was just going to watch a few minutes, but I ended up watching the whole thing. It was very enthralling, and it just kind of sucked you in. It was definitely a match that I absolutely loved watching. But for me, what was decisive was, yeah, I've already kind of said that, so I don't think I need to say too much more. So obviously Zheng Siwei and Wang Yaqiong managed to finish their partnership on top. It was a lovely moment afterwards with the crowd, with Zheng and Wang. You know, Zheng Siwei I think he's born to be behind the microphone. He got the crowd chanting. I don't quite know what was being said. Maybe someone can put what he said below when he got the crowd to chant his name, chant whatever it was. But yeah, no, lovely moment. It was also a lovely moment to see him walk out with his son before the match. And yeah, he's going to be missed on the tour. Their pair, you know, they've been so good, so dominant. And I think now talking about this, I obviously have to kind of finish this section by saying that it is the end of an era for the mixed doubles. Obviously, now we've got the retirement of Zheng Siwei, which obviously puts an end to his partnership with Wang Yaqiong, but we've also seen the end of the other three pairs that make up what have been the big four over the last, you know, 4 or 5 years. Obviously, we've seen the retirement of Wang Yi Lu and Wang Dongping. That happened a while ago, but the other pairs being Yuta Watanabe and Arisa Higashino, they're no longer playing together. Seo Seung-jae and Cha Yu-jung, they're not playing together anymore, and Dichapon and Sapsiri, they're not playing together anymore. So all those pairs that have made up such a big part of the last 4 or 5 years, maybe more, 6 years of mixed doubles. The pairs that, when it comes to the biggest tournaments, they're the ones that are winning it, are no more. So the mixed doubles is going to go for a transition period. We're going to see plenty of new pairs. I've seen that new partnerships in other countries are going to be formed in 2025. So how this all lines up, and we've obviously, it would be very interesting to see. Are we going to see another big four come in? Are we going to see a brand new pair? Are we going to see some of, obviously China are going to be a big part of that. They've already got pairs that are ready to fill in Zheng and Wang's shoes, but what about everyone else? So yeah, it's an end of an era in more ways than one. But it was really good that it got to finish, especially for Zheng Siwei, with such an amazing match. Right, okay, so on to the last section of this video, the Q&A section. I put it out to my YouTube and Instagram as usual, and you've obliged. I think this is the most amount of questions I've ever received. So I'm going to look at my Instagram ones first. Let's just upload these questions and have a little look at what ones I want to answer. Okay, so this first one is kind of a follow-on from the last one. What do you think about Chen Tou's performance in this World Tour Finals? Well, obviously, I said their final was absolutely sublime, and it was. They played brilliantly. The defense was super solid. Chen was attacking really, really well, and Siwei Wei's defense was rock solid. You can definitely see influence from Nova Widianto. Obviously, I said that about the other Malaysian pair, Liu and Zheng, from the China Masters, where they had a fantastic tournament, and I think the influence runs deep in the mixed doubles discipline in Malaysia. Chen and To are a pair that are steadily growing, and I think their performance they showed throughout these World Tour Finals could be a sign of things to come. Jill and Steen couldn't stop saying that they are a pair on the rise, a pair to look out for, and a pair with a bright future. And I have to agree with them. They were absolutely amazing all the way through. They won all their group games rather convincingly. They only dropped the opening game to Go Sun Wat and Siobhan Jamie Lai. Other than that, they pretty much steamed through the draw until the final, and then they put in a fantastic performance against Zheng and Wang. You got to remember, Zheng and Wang, they might not have been at their absolute best, but they had played themselves into the tournament. Obviously, they had the huge support of the crowd, and they also had the nice little bonus that Chen and To had never taken a game off them. I don't think they'd ever got over 15 points. So the fact, if you put that all in and then you consider the performance that Chen and To delivered, then that's absolutely fantastic. I said that the influence of Nova is quite clear. I've always kind of thought that Siwei Wei reminds me a little bit of, not necessarily Natsir as a whole, but Natsir and like Vita Marissa, that kind of style of player. Very strong in defense, lovely skills, very creative, and kind of reads the game really, really well. If she can continue to develop her game in general, then she's going to be a lot to handle with for a lot of the other female players. And obviously, she's backed up with Chen Tangji, who's an incredible athlete, good attacking power, great set pieces, and he's also got a very solid defense. So I was very impressed with them throughout. I didn't pick them in my prediction video, but I also think that if they brought the kind of level that we know they're capable of, they could definitely get far in a tournament. I think they exceeded my expectations even in that factor. So yeah, they were absolutely amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing them and how they perform moving forward. Do you think Wang Yaqiong will retire, or will she continue on with a new partner? Good, interesting question. I'm not entirely sure, would be the honest answer. I don't think there's been any inclination that she's thinking of retiring. She's still relatively young, so I think she's well within her capabilities, and she's a player that's done well with multiple partners. Even in that little small time where she partnered Yu Xuanyi, she's still able to reach finals. So she's definitely got capability to be able to kind of partner up with anyone with a little bher ability and do well. So I think she'll continue on. I hope she continues on, because she's a fantastic player, and she could really set her legend into stone if she can then go and do just as well with yet another partner. So yeah, I don't think she's going to retire, although I'm not 100% sure if there's any Chinese fans watching. I know I do have a lot of people that kind of do give me some input from the Chinese side of things, but I haven't heard any rumours or anything that Wang Yaqiong will be retiring. I think she will continue on. Who's your partner? We'll just have to wait and see. How can Antonsen lose to Wang Zhi Yi 2 times in a row? Is this the start of a new rivalry? Well, I think the last 2 times that Antonsen and Wang Zhi Yi played, I think one thing we have to bear in mind is that Antonsen was not at her absolute best. Obviously in Denmark there was the whole issue with her coaching situation, the whole situation with the KBA, with the BKA, sorry, that I think was looming over her. Anseong didn't look too interested. I think by the time she got to the final, she looked completely out of practice. At this tournament, the World Tour Finals, obviously Anseong was in better form. She's had less taping. She obviously won the China Masters. So I think that result is more of an indication of the level that the kind of matches these two can have. However, it must be said that towards Anseong's match against Han Yue, she was rubbing her legs. She then, in the match with Wang Zhi Yi, she did have both upper thighs taped. So maybe she was having some cramping issues, or a slight strain in her leg muscles. So again, I don't think Anseong was playing that match at full tilt. However, I think Wang Zhi Yi is certainly a player that could form a rivalry with Anseong. She's certainly a player that I foresee will be one of the world's best, if not the world's best in the coming years, and definitely a player that can disrupt Anseong's dominance. Whether this can form into a rivalry, we'll just have to wait and see. But the fact that I think Chen Yufei, Wang Zhi has a similar style to Chen Yufei, very good, which in turn is somewhat similar to Anseong, very good base game, very good rallying game, very solid, very good shot quality, and all those kind of things. I think we could see some really epic matches from these two. I'm definitely interested to see the first match where both players are firing in all cylinders. Both players have had sufficient rest. I don't want to see it at a tournament where it's the third tournament in a row and it's in the final and both players have done are tired. I want it to be where they meet each other in whatever round it is, but both are fresh, both have had good training block going in, and both fire on all cylinders. That could be really interesting. Who would have the edge? I'd probably give it still slightly to Anseong, but I think it would be an absolute battle, and Wang Zhi Yi is fast improving, like I said earlier in this video. So whether it be a rivalry, we'll have to wait and see. It certainly can be. They're both amazing players. Obviously, we all know how good Anseong is. Wang Zhi has been steadily improving and steadily showing to everyone that she can win big events. So it certainly has all the makings of a rivalry. We'll just have to wait and see if it actually comes to anything. Do you think Trisa/Gayatri can break into the top 5 and win big titles next year, considering their performance? So Trisa Jolly and Gayatri Gopichand, the Indian pair, played really well in their group matches. They almost beat Lu and Tan. They then defeated Pearly and Tina, and they were unfortunately no match for Matsuyama and Shida in the final group game, where I think if they had won, they would have had a chance to qualify. But that kind of last match aside, they played two very good games. We know they're very capable. They've got to the semi-finals with All England twice. They've beaten a number of the world's best pairs. They have beaten this year the pair that won the whole thing in Hangzhou, Lee So-hee and Baek Ha-na. So we know they're capable. But can they break into the top 5? Well, they're going to have to obviously be able to become a little bit more consistent with their results, be able to get to the latter stages of the big tournaments more frequently. They are certainly capable. Obviously, the way they played at this tournament shows they are capable. It's just whether they can actually step up. I did think that watching them play at the World Tour Finals, they definitely looked a lot faster. They looked a lot stronger. They looked a lot more solid. They had the kind of physicality that you expect, that you actually need to have to be a pair that's going to be fighting with the top 8 in the world. And actually that was quite surprising for me, because I did say in my last video that I felt that the pairs they'd have to play in these groups, maybe not so Lu and Tan, although they're just really good, but Pearly and Tina and Matsuyama and Shida, I thought the way they played, which is a lot faster and quicker with lots of rotations, would be too fast and too quick for the Indian pair to compete. Well, not to necessarily compete, but to have a chance of winning. But they proved me wrong there. In their match against the Malaysians, they were equally as fast, if not, they were the ones dictating the pace. They're both very skillful players. So, yeah, the fact that they showed, to me, an increased level in their physicality, their speed, and their pace of their ability to play at a certain level of pace and rotate around each other definitely is a promising sign. And if they can keep that up and just deliver it a little more consistently and keep working at it, then yes, I do think they are definitely a pair that could fight for the top 5 and be a contender in a lot of the events, including the Major Championship. So it's a great thing for Indian women's doubles. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. One last question. This one actually comes from my YouTube, because a lot of the questions on my YouTube channel were very similar to the ones I got on my Instagram, and a number of the questions I've already kind of answered earlier in this video. So this one is the draw for the semi-finals flawed? He goes on and does this kind of, explains this guy a few of the things, and he says stuff like, you know, should it be held over 12 days where all the players play each other, so it's not two groups, it's one big group, and all this kind of stuff. So is the draws for the semi-finals flawed? Well, I think you first have to understand why the draws are done the way they're done. Obviously, you have two groups. The top two, the players that, or the pairs that qualify top of each group, go into the 1 and 2 seeding. So they're kind of like, you know, that those positions are fixed, and then the other two remaining ones are drawn out of a hat. And the reason why this all came about was because of what happened at the London Olympics in 2012, where in the women's doubles, a number of pairs were deliberately throwing matches to try and get a favourable draw in the knockout stages. So that was quite a smear on the badminton world. Obviously, it kicked up a lot of fuss, numerous things, and obviously one big thing that came of it was, how do BWF do draws where there's a group stage involved? And one big thing that has changed ever since then for stuff like the World Tour Finals is that once you come out the group stages, it's then drawn out of a hat. I believe they do that in the team events as well. It's just because I remember, actually, the team event one's quite funny, because when I played in 2008, we beat Korea, and Korea got to the final, but the reason they did it was to get into the opposite half of China. So obviously China were the favourites, they did win, but Korea purposely threw it against us so that they could get a favourable draw. So it's little instances like that that they can just tarnish the sport's name. So I think this is a little bit more of a fair way. What this guy indicates in terms of, should we have just one big group and play it over 12 days, that would be quite nice. I think that would be quite tough on the players, even with rest days. That's a lot of matches, and also I think there is quite a lot of costs that go into that. That obviously increase a lot of costs on the BWF end, and I'm not quite sure they're willing to do that. Also, that means you've got to sell out tickets on far more days. There's a lot more pressure to deliver on those kind of things. But in theory, it's quite a nice idea. Then he goes on to say that then the top 4 players from the group will then go into a knockout stage. I don't then quite know how you would do that. You would then have to draw it randomly, which is kind of the issue that he pulls up at the start. But yeah, is the draw system flawed? I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect way. I do quite like the fact that it's done randomly. I know you can get repeat matches, which is a little bit annoying, but it does stop players from trying to get favourable positions in the groups to try and avoid certain players, which can lead to, you know, thrown matches. Although in the group stages we saw a few players not put maximum intensity into their final match if they knew they'd qualified, and I think also you see that if it doesn't really matter who they face in the semis, because everyone's of an equal standing. But yeah, like all things here, it could be given more thought. There could be potential ways to make it improved. I haven't given it too much thought myself. If any of you watching have, then obviously feel free to get in the comments section and let me know what you think would be the best system for these kind of tournaments where there's a group stage going into a knockout stage, or just general. How do you think, what are ways that draws could be done better? I know that a lot of people do always kind of like talk about these things, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe I'll give it some more thought and come back with a slightly better answer. But is it flawed? I wouldn't say it's necessarily flawed. I think it was just in place to fix a different problem. Can it be improved upon? Possibly. But yeah, I don't have an answer in terms of what would my solution be. I'd love to hear yours. Okay, so that's it for the questions. I think I've managed to cover pretty much all the main topics from these World Tour Finals. There's a lot. If I have missed anything, then obviously just get in the comments and let me know. If it's something interesting, I will reply to you, and it could even spark some debate in a future video. But I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beckman's Breakdown. I hope you enjoy and appreciate the slightly better audio and visual. Definitely obviously going to be using this moving forward. For the remainder of 2024, I've still got potentially 2 videos that I'm going to be releasing to you. One will be another Beckman's Breakdown, and that's going to be on the King Cup. That's the competition that Lindan has run and is looking to run at the end of the year for the men's singles players. It sounds like a really interesting event. He's spared no expense, and in some respects I think he's trying to do it as a show BWF this is what can be done if you get the right amount of sponsors in. It looks absolutely amazing. And the other video is my biography video on Liliana Natsir. I'm probably about halfway to 2/3 through the edit on that. I will actually be re-recording the audio because I did it on my old microphone, and obviously with my new microphone here, I think it needs to be re-recorded so that it sounds even better. But the main edit is about between halfway to 2/3 done, and I'm really excited to bring you that one. I'm going to do some long nights and push some long days to make sure that tries to get out to you before the end of the year. And then moving into 2025, I've got lots and lots of video days, obviously plenty of Beckman's breakdowns, got plenty of ideas for other videos and all that kind of stuff. So thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And one last thing, actually, I just want to, obviously now we're coming towards the end of 2024, there have been a number of players that have retired. This is a list of them, the ones that I can recall. If I've missed any out, please do add them into the comments. And there's one that has got a little bit of a question mark against it, but I'll get to that. So this year we sadly saw the retirement of Kento Momota, Marcus Finaldi Gideon, Kevin Sanjaya Sukumoyo, Sai Praneeth, Kanta Tsuneyama, Rowinda Prajongjai, Jongofan Kitatharakul, Herbing Zhao, Lu Yu Chen, Ujwan Yi, Wakana Nagahara, Aya Ohori, Zheng Siwei, Li Yang, and Taizu Ying. That last one, Taizu Ying, the last I actually heard was that she was going to have knee surgery, and as a result of that, she has postponed her retirement. That's what I heard. If anyone can confirm that she actually has decided to retire, she's just having the knee surgery, obviously for her own health, please do correct me. But I believe that she might make a return in 2025 and try to go out, maybe something like Zheng Siwei. Well, I think she'd like to go out actually playing. So that, if that's true, that'd be really great, because I think the last few months of her playing have been a little bit upsetting, and not the way that such a legend like herself should be going out. And yeah, so I hope that is true. And finally, obviously, they haven't technically retired yet. They will be playing one more tournament in 2025, but of course, I can't overlook that both Hendra Setiawan and Mohamed Hassan have announced their retirement, with their final tournament to be the Indonesian Masters, which will be held in January. So I will be doing a Beckman's breakdown on that, and I will also be doing a video on the Daddies and those two players separately. That's going to take some work. I have no idea how long that's going to take. Probably a year or two. Hopefully shorter, but it will take a long time. That is a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of watching them play, which I won't mind doing that part. But yeah, those are the list of players who have announced their retirement in 2024/early 2025. I wish them nothing but the best for their future. They will be missed. They've all been fantastic players with achievements that are amazing. And yeah, it's nice to end this video and the last Beckman's breakdown in terms of the World Tour for 2024 by announcing their retirement. So again, thanks for watching everyone. I'll see you next time.